I'm trying to see the names. Who is going to present the first paper? Camila, Morales, Tiago, and Ana.
I think that let us start first study entitled An Example of Use of Variational Methods in Quantum Machine Learning in Present with authors Marco Simonetti, Damiano Perri, and Osvaldo Gervasi.
Okay, I need to confess that I'm not sure who we are. Is someone physically in the conference? Yeliz, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Yes. Okay, but you are in the conference itself.
No, I couldn't attend over there. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Next time, I wish. Next time we will be
No,
together. I
perfect.
think that.
Everything
Okay.
is okay. I'm trying to understand who is here and who is
Yeah.
part of our. Yeah. Did you intend to join the ecosystem services session?
Yeah. I think that Ahudere Dursun online. I think that
Hmm.
others. We have four presentation. First of all, um, first presentation with Professor Gervasi, but I cannot see that. Next presentation, Ahudere Dursun. Let's if they are not doing this presentation, we can continue. Let's proceed with the study entitled Time Series Based Frequency Analysis of Violence and Criminalization Related Dynamic Mental Health Media News by Ahudari Dursun.
So I think we are in different sessions, but this is that's the problem. I'm not sure where is the current the correct link to my or to the session that I am supposed to join. So this is not the correct one, probably. Uh,
I don't know.
okay, let's see. What? Okay, I will try to. This system looks a bit complicated for me. I don't know why. Uh, uh, Can you see the Word file that I'm
Yes,
showing?
yes, yes,
This
yes.
is the session that I think that this is the name of the session that I think that should be in this. It not this one. Probably I'm not in correct place.
Probably.
Come.
Yes, this is correct.
This is the sorry, Natale. What did
Yes,
you say?
the first is correct. I write in the chat the name of the paper for this session.
Ah,
So this is the correct session, the MC2P.
Yes,
Okay, good.
yeah.
and this is the first paper.
Okay, you have any idea who is going to present it? Because I don't see any name that sounds like Camila,
Okay,
Tiago, or
okay.
Ana.
Maybe time zone. Yes, maybe time zone is different. So that. Okay. Okay, you can start, please. You can start.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
in any case, we cannot start because I don't know who is supposed to present this paper. So we are here. I will. I'm trying to see who are the people here. Well, let's see. The first paper, I don't think that someone is able to present. Sabrina, Federica or Corrado are not here also. So this is the second paper. And Gianpetro, Angela, or Georgia are not here neither.
Yes, yes. Here I am.
Oh, Georgia. Okay. Hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Yes, yes. Here I am.
Okay. So by now we can only have the last one
Nice to meet you too.
because I don't see anybody in that belongs to the other. Georgia is Angela is here by chance
No, only I think there are the only one of the
from the authors. Okay. So Georgia, do you want to start your presentation because it is already, or to wait a few minutes?
Yes, I can start.
Okay, I guess that this will be the best course of action because I don't see anybody from the others from the other presentation. So at least to start with you, it is okay. I can stop sharing and I can leave you the floor if you want. Let me see what is the chat. Okay, this is the chat. It is okay for you, Georgia? 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you can hear me? Yes, I can hear. Let's try again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I am able. I think that you should be able to hear me. Who is there in the room? I am sorry, but I cannot hear you.
Oh, Dani, can you hear me?
Oh, now,
Okay.
yes. Hi, how are you?
Okay.
Long time no see.
We missed our technical assistants in the room, so we are self-assisted. I believe we can also...
Maybe
Mm.
do you have to record the session? No.
Oh, our technical assistant maybe is
Natale. Natale, you are our technical...
Eccomi.
Natale?
Yes?
Oh, we
Okay.
were waiting for you in the room. We didn't know you were online.
Vabbè.
Are there other people in the room besides you both or not?
We are four people in the room.
So,
Okay. So you are on site?
Ana Clara, the first presenter, sent us a video because she cannot be present. And then I'm the second speaker. And I think we are missing the third presenter.
No, the third is here. I think that, let me see, I think that Georgia is here, Georgia Tucci.
Giorgia Tucci, okay, great.
Yeah, she's here online. I cannot see, I'm not sure if she can hear us. I think she has any kind of technical problem. Now she's muted. Georgia, can you hear us? Oh.
Oh, Ana Clara, she's connected. Hello,
Ana
Ana
Clara
Clara.
is the first speaker.
Yes, but Sabrina, I'd like you to play the video, please.
Yes, no problem.
I hope we don't have any technical problems because there's nobody here in the room to help us with that.
Okay, let's start, Dani.
Yes, I suggest if you can, because you are in the control room. I guess that it will be better if you can take the chairing for me, because I can hear sometimes yes, sometimes not. So it will be good if you manage this topic. Will be okay, because I see that you have better equipment than me.
Okay. So I will chair the session from here. That's what you were suggesting. I'm not sure I heard you properly.
Okay, so if, maybe we are all in the same trouble, but
okay. So welcome everybody to this session, which is about network contribution to people and so ecosystem services in planning. And we have three presentations today. And the one will be a pre-recorded video. And the second will be in presence. And the third will be delivered remotely by Georgia. So I hope I will be able to show you the video, and most importantly, I hope that the the audio also comes to you. Can you see the video?
Yes.
yep.
Can you hear the audio?
I'm not sure. Let's try.
No, we are not listening.
No, we cannot hear, I
No.
think.
No.
No.
We see the video, but cannot hear the sound.
Natalia, can you help us to deliver the audio online? Because I think there must be something which needs to be done from here.
I don't have the video. I don't...
Eh sì, lo so, però come si fa a condividere l'audio da qua?
Quando lo condividi, cosa?
L'ho fatto.
Condividisco. Togli la condivisione, prova a fare e guarda se c'è qualcosa da aspettare.
first term of 2022, and it is entitled.
Okay.
Oh,
No,
that
it's
was
okay.
First of all, I would like to thank you for your time and appreciation. This is the synthesis of a research that took place in the last term of 2021 and the first term of 2022, and it is entitled Multiscalar Planning Approach in the Analysis and Proposition of Ecosystem Services. It was mainly conducted by Camila Fernandes, which is an architect and urban planner. I'm Thiago Melo. I was also part of the research. I'm an undergraduate student in architecture and urban planning, and we are from the Geoprocessing Laboratory, coordinated by Professor Ana Clara Mourão. This study is mainly based in three concepts, which are the multiscalar planning, green infrastructure, and the UN's SDGs. The first one, the multiscalar planning, which is the most important one, is related to a more depth and objective and also detailed way of analysis of the territory. The second one, green infrastructure, I bet you all are familiarized with it, is related to the multifunctional potentialities and functions of the green cover, especially in the cities. And the SDGs are related to this global path, this global agenda with regard to sustainability and a more equal and healthier way of growing. So our methodology is supported by three different scales of analysis and planning. We part from the macro scale to get a big picture and the context of objective study, and then we go to the meso scale to finally go to the principal part of the paper, which is the micro scale. In the first step, we have the regional scale approach, in which we are going to introduce you to the Iron Quadrangle region, and we will call it IQ region. This is an important area in our state in terms of environmental quality, in terms of economy, of natural and cultural resources. But here we have a conflict of interest because the mining sector is extremely important in terms of economy, but it is also extremely impactful. Then we go to the urban scale. In Brazil, the urban scale is the most considered scale in terms of planning. We tend to be always looking for the city and its boundaries. Here we have the capital of our state. This is one of the biggest Brazilian cities, and this is also a center of culture, so this is extremely important for us. And then we go to the local scale, which is the main object of our study. This is Centro-Sul Administrative Unit. This is an extremely important area in the city because it was the first one to be planned. The city actually began in this area, and we have here a considerable part of green cover, and also this is a consolidated area in the city. Now you can see my screen the aspects we considered when we were developing the research. We are clearly talking about environmental quality and planning strategies. So by dealing with these issues, we are talking about water, green cover, climate action, climate behavior, sustainable cities. All of these topics are related to the SDGs, which were the base of the developing of the research. What we sought to do in each of these scales was to analyze the positive and negative aspects regarding environmental quality. So we pointed out vulnerabilities and potentialities for each of the study areas. In the first one, the IQ region, we sought to identify the connections between green cover and the water resources with climate behavior. We tried to identify also vulnerable areas. We tried to analyze spatial dynamics and so on. On the urban scale in Belo Horizonte City, we identified priority areas for us to purpose ecosystem services based on green infrastructure. And then we go to the local scale, in which we are necessarily going to talk about design itself. Now I'm going to present to you our data collection. This is the IQ region, our regional scale. In here, you can see topography, land use, land cover, vegetation information, also climate information, and water supply information. Here we were analyzing natural landscape, soils and crests, and so on, wind patterns, biomes, the quality of the vegetation, if this vegetation were protected or not. We tried to understand the dynamics of the urbanization and the mining activities and other economic activities. Here we also analyze water supply conflicts and so on. In the second step, we actually performed similar analysis, similar aspects were considered. But since now we are dealing with the city itself, the human resources, now we sought to identify where were the most impacted, the most vulnerable area in terms of the lack of quality, the lack of environmental quality. This led us to the most dense area of the city in terms of population, in terms of built volume, which is the Centro-Sul Administrative Unit. And here we consider all those aspects beyond the environmental information, because now we were going to talk about design proposals. In the propositional phase, finally, we summarize parameters and design interventions based on best practices we identified all over the world and also in the literature, the most important things people are doing nowadays. This in my screen is a summary sheet indicating important information such as urban impact, if this is conventional or not in the Brazilian context, because some of the proposals might seem simple, but maybe they are not conventional for us in Brazil. We also sought to identify the stakeholders groups that could be involved and possible policies that could put those things in practice. We also connect each of the proposals to benefits according to peers, so we try to link them actually to drainage aspects, climate aspects, leisure, landscape, greenery, and so on. And then we zone the spatial cut, the local scale spatial cut for each of the proposal. The objective here was to indicate the suitability of the proposal based on the analytical structure we talked before. So now what you can see on my screen is our collection of proposals. Here we have 12, as I said before, and they can be divided into parameters and design interventions. So for example, here we have runoff ditches, here we have detention basins, vegetated volume, vertical gardens, and as I also showed you, after each proposal we zone our local scale area, and using as example the vertical gardens, here we have the less suitable and the more suitable area in this local scale. This is because here we have downtown, we have high-rise buildings, and in contrast, here we have a slum with low-rise buildings. Here we have a more green area nearby, a soil crest. So what we try to do was to identify for each proposal the more and the less suitable areas in the local scale. Regarding our results and conclusions, I will point out our 4 principal topics. The first one is that we observed the benefits of dealing with different scales, both in terms of planning and also in terms of design. The second topic here highlighted is that we observed that the nature, the type of the proposals and also their scales are extremely related to the temporal and spatial effects on landscape. And I say this because, for example, when we were dealing with the regional scale, our IQ region, we were analyzing conservation units, forests, which are different from pocket gardens, green roofs. Although they are related, they are also extremely different because, in one hand, we have a short-term impact in terms of urban impact. And on the other one, we have more long-term intervention. The third topic I'm going to highlight is that by thinking about sustainable green interventions, we could understand that different stakeholders are expected to be part of these interventions, be a part of these transformations. And also we could see that a same place, a same intervention, same parameter can serve as different things, can have multiple functions. This is because a community garden, for example, can serve in one hand as a place for social life, but at the same time it can serve as a mitigator for heat waves. So this is the principle of multifunctionality, which is extremely related to urban green infrastructure. The last thing we want to highlight, and I think this is the most important thing, is that since this research were based in the application of geoprocessing tools, this is also a methodological contribution. This is a proposition of a framework that can be applied to different case studies, different territories, different scenarios, and that's it. I thank you once again for your time, and we are open for discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sabrina,
I
for
think
sharing.
we might collect just one question now, and so we leave room for discussion on all of the contribution at the very end. Is there any questions for Ana Clara and her colleagues? Come here, please.
It is a general, more than a question, a general consideration. No? We saw a lot of examples of where the problem of design with nature, we may say, delivers some collection of intervention typologies, according with the issues that are identified in a sample study area or something like that. And generally, one of the final remarks is that those solutions can be exported on other cases, can be a guide in order to influence also other cases. I have some reflection about that, especially because when you use natural solution, that includes some specific species, trees, plants, and other solutions like that. I believe that the relation with the place of the implementation is very crucial, because you can go in the direction to promote, to suggest as design option some categories that are not coherent with the context where that guidelines could be applied, could be transferred, could be used, in order to improve the design. This is a general consideration. It's not, but what do you think about that?
May I answer, Sabrina?
Yes,
are you
please,
listening to me?
Clara.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at the first point, we decided to work with different scales because when we talk about a bigger territory, we talk about conservation units. When we talk about a municipality, we are talking about green and blue infrastructure. And when we arrive to the local scale, what to do in a place, in a block, in a local position, we talk about ecosystem services. So we analyzed the very different scale and we constructed proposals adapted to the different skills. In Brazil, we have a very strange way of planning because we are quite morphometric. What we plan here in our master plans are the setbacks, the floor area ratio, and the coefficient, the volumetric coefficient to build. We don't talk about green solutions. So it's a way to include the green solutions, green parameters, and to tell people where they are suitable to be used. Because if we leave it very generic, people won't use it, won't understand what to do and where. So we plan it according to scale, according to where to put, and according to what is suitable to put there. So we believe we are contributing to the future of our master plans here in Brazil. Did I
Yes,
answer?
Ana Clara, thank you very much. So I guess
Thank you.
the
Thank you for
keyword
helping me,
is,
Sabrina, sharing the video.
Yes, this is very site specific and they shouldn't be exported. Based on the program, the second presentation is delivered by me. And there is a piece of study I have done with my colleagues. Rado Zoppi, Federica Isola, and Federica Leone, and it's about special features of regional green infrastructure and identification of ecological corridors, and it's a case study from Sardinia. This is the general overview, so it's classical structure. I will just point out here at the data and methods section, which is articulated in 3 sections, so it will be easier for you to follow. So the first part is about assessing multifunctionality, the second, identifying ecological corridors, and the third about understanding how they are related one with the other. So you already saw this picture in the earlier presentation. Is a very common portrait of the green infrastructure, and you can also see the definition by the European Commission, which highlights 2 key characteristics of a green infrastructure. One is multifunctionality, and the other is connectivity and connectedness. And so the objective of this study is to investigate the relationship between the 2, multifunctionality on one hand and connectivity on the other hand. And as case study, we will focus on the island of Sardinia. And this is because, not just because we are from Sardinia, but also because it's an island. So it is easier to identify the corridors because they are not affected by relationship with other terrestrial areas, since we are only looking at terrestrial areas. And as core areas for the green infrastructure, we will look at a natural protected area, and this is just an image which shows you the very different kind of protected areas. So we have parks, Natura 2000 sites, areas which are protected for the faunas and so on. So coming to the methods, the first thing, as I said, was assessing multifunctionality, and we tried to do that by looking at 7 ecosystem services, which were selected spanning across the 3 broad categories by the Common International Classification of Ecosystem Services. So we have, for instance, 3 variables that are from cultural ecosystem services, so existent and decast value, recreational values, and landscape values. And then we have 3 regulation ecosystem services, the ecosystem capacity to provide nursery for species, and the regulation of local climate as the regulation of land surface temperature, and the regulation of global climate as the carbon sequestration. And finally, a provision ecosystem services, which is the agriculture and forestry productivity. And for each of them, of course, we had special data, input data sources, and different tools and models, which I'm not going to talk about because there are constraints on time limits. So these are the first set of maps that we obtained, where every ecosystem service is normalized in the 0 to 1 scale according to the models that I showed before. And the 80th map shows the multiple ecosystem service in landscape index. That is the total sum of the 7 ecosystem services. Now, as far as the ecological corridors are concerned, there are 2 main approaches, and we chose the second one, so the least cost path model, which develops in 4 steps. So the first 2 are carried out in parallel. One is mapping suitability for animal species, and the other is mapping ecological integrity. And the first one is based on expert values, which assign a score to each land use cover. And the second is based on the well-known Burkert matrix from a study which has been used extensively in the literature. And from these two maps, we get the resistance map, which basically assesses how difficult or how easy it is for animal species to move across the landscape, and areas which have a lower resistance are the ecological corridors, where faunal species are supposed to move easily across the landscape. So this how the method develops by using a famous tool, which is a linkage mapper or linkage pathways. It's been renamed, and this is the resulting map where you have core areas here with the hatches and the corridors, the blue lines, while these green areas are the areas that have the lowest values of resistance. So the lowest value of the cost weighted distance. And finally, the third part, which is what relationship is there between ecosystem services, as we map them, and resistance to movement. And we try to do that by using a linear regression, where the cost weight distance, so the resistance to movement, is assumed to be a function of the 7 ecosystem services, and we had a control variable which relates to elevation and another control variable which looks for autocorrelation. And this is the final table where I will highlight that all of the coefficients were significantly correlated, and the sign that we expected for the control variable is consistent. So the higher the altitude and the more difficult it is for species to move. So let's look now first at these 4 coefficients. They are all positive, which means that if we increase the value of these ecosystem services, then the cost weight distance will increase, which means that it will be more difficult for species to move around the landscape because the resistance will be higher. So we cannot work on that, on a policy, to develop policies. But we can focus on the other 3, which have a negative sign. So this is the landscape surface temperature. And let me remind that I didn't say this earlier, but the LST variable is higher when the temperature is lower. So a 10% increase in variable means lower temperature. So the lower the temperature, the lower the cost weight distance or the resistance. Increase in agriculture and forestry productivity means lower resistance as well. And also the increase in landscape values means lower resistance. So we can focus on these 3 to develop policies that aim at connecting core areas through ecological corridors. And the first variable was the one related to land surface temperature. And what we found out is, in another study, that agricultural areas have a very significant impact on the land surface temperature. And this happens both in summer and in the vegetation period. In summer, because bare soil act effectively as artificial land, as if everything was artificial. And in the vegetation period, because they prevent evapotranspiration, air circulation, and downwind cooling, which means that agricultural areas do not contribute to decreasing land surface temperature. Actually, they do contribute to increasing them. And the second policy, variable is about agriculture and forestry productivity. And this has a dual behavior. On the one hand, agricultural areas reduce connectivity. And this happens because of physical barriers like fences because of agricultural management practices such as tillage, or even the use of biocides, herbicides, pesticides, and whatever. They do all contribute to decreasing the possibility of movement from species. So they reduce movement, they raise the resistance. But in this same variable, we also have forest areas, and they behave in a very opposite way because they will improve connectivity to the extent that when we have habitat loss, we have a lower number of species, and the well-known and well-studied edge effect. And even small patches can be effective. So this points to the first possible policy, which we'll see in a minute, which is about afforestation. And the third variable that was important, because we can work on that, is a landscape values, sorry. So the idea here is that the more valuable this landscape is, so coastal area, lakes, wetlands, rivers, and creeks, which are all protected in the Sardinian landscape plan, and the lower the resistance to movement. And this is especially important for rivers because they act as green corridors for several animal species. Finally, let's look at the two policies. One I already introduced, that is about afforesting areas. And this could work both because it will reduce the temperature and because it will contribute to higher forestry productivity. But it comes with no cost. It comes without costs because there are some issues to be taken into account. If we, for instance, afforested extensively farmed areas, then we might threaten the social and cultural ties between farmers and their land, or we could undermine the profits when the agriculture is more intensive. And also, we might even contribute to abandonment of rural areas, and there's also an issue of availability of funds. So who's going to spend and invest in afforestation to contribute to provision of ecosystem services and increasing productivity? There should be the public funds, but can we afford that? And as for the second kind of policy, that is aimed at improving the landscape value, and I already showed some types of landscape that are protected in Sardinia. So the idea could be either to enforce a stricter protection of the landscapes that are already protected, or to include some other landscape features. And these are some examples of landscape features which could be protected and are not currently protected, such as hedgerows, lime trees, and dry walls. And it is because they are linear features in the landscape that have been proved in the literature to support connectivity, landscape heterogeneity, and presence of species. And at the same time, they do have a social and cultural value. So the idea here with both of the policies is that by improving some ecosystem services, then we could improve the connectivity in the Sardinian network. And that's all for me. Okay. If there's a very quick question that I can answer, I'll be happy to, because there's also a third speaker.
I would like to ask a short question.
Yeah, sure, please.
Sabrina, thank you very much. Very interesting. I wanted to ask if you tried to test the correlation.
Sorry, Danny. Can you speak up, please?
Sorry. Okay. I want to ask if you checked correlations between the variables. For example, the landscape value and the agricultural use, for example. If they perhaps they work together.
Yeah, I did that actually in another study And what I found out, not surprisingly, is that landscape value, as well as carbon storage and natural value, are negatively correlated with agricultural values. So whenever the profit from agriculture is higher, then these three tend to decrease, and there are clusters in space where this is even more significant. So the correlation doesn't work at the same in the same way all across the island, but it really depends on which area we are looking at.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so we have now a third speaker, which is Giorgia Tucci. Giorgia is going to talk about the provision of ecosystem services along the Italian coastal areas, a correlation analysis between environmental quality and urbanization. Giorgia, you can start, please. Giorgia, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, maybe it could be better if I leave my camera off, because if I put it on, I can hear you. So
great. Can you share your screen if you have a presentation to show us?
Okay, no. I don't know. Is it possible to share just a part of the screen?
For just a tiny second, we saw your desktop.
I think you need first to share your screen and then choose one of the applications.
Do you know if it's possible to share just a part of the screen?
You can also share the screen and then go to PowerPoint and in presentation mode. Georgia, are you still there?
Yes, Sabrina, is it possible, do you know, where maybe it could be better if I can send you my presentation, because I can share correctly the screen. I put it on the chat.
Or maybe, yeah, or maybe to Natale, I don't know.
I don't have the presentation. Giorgia, try to share the desktop and use the PowerPoint and set on full screen. Share the desktop.
It doesn't work. I don't know, maybe I have to... Probabilmente devo consentire da qualche parte, ma non so dove, perché non me lo fa più fare.
Allora, prova un attimo ad uscire dalla sessione e a rientrare velocemente.
Vuoi mandarmela via mail, Giorgia?
Adesso proviamo un attimo con il riavvio e vediamo se si sistema.
She can send a link from the drive so that you click and you share it.
Okay, I try again.
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Okay, great.
Metti
Okay,
sul
great.
screen e siamo pronti.
Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes, I can. Yes, there's a PDF,
Set
I
it to
think.
screen.
Make it bigger. No, it's not there any longer. Okay. Okay, we can see it. Not any longer. What are you doing?
Sabrina, sorry, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Ah, okay, great. And can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Okay. Ready to start? No, you know what happens when you go full screen, it doesn't appear anymore. So I would suggest not going full screen, but just make it a bit bigger. Yes, that's perfect. You can start if you wish. Thank you. It's not there, Georgia. It's not there anymore.
It's me.
Georgia, can you, maybe you could speak by looking at your slide and we just will follow your speech. Georgia, your mic is turned off. Oh. The thing is, we cannot even hear Georgia. Her mic is disabled. So either we have. See. Sì, io le due volte. Oh, no. So Georgia, it seems that you cannot hear us. So if you are not going to either present or send the slide or speak without a slide, maybe I would suggest having room for a couple of questions so that we can wrap up the session. Georgia, can you hear us? So I guess we can take one or two questions if there are any, so that if Georgia comes back.
I have a long question for you.
Oh, can you come here? Otherwise, I don't think they will hear you. Thank you. Francesco Scorza.
I recognize that the structure of the work is of course well organized. I am really I really agree for the list of final remarks, of the ideas, of recommendation about. So. My critics is on the variable you use for the analysis. And the critics are the following. The first, you are very confident in land surface temperature. I am not. And you know because we discussed already about that. And the hypothesis you do using land surface temperature, from my perspective, from my critical perspective, is that the result of a phenomena that is managed globally, no, that is that depends on global variables, affects local behaviors of species in green infrastructure design. So I believe that any recommendation you can do will not change the situation. Okay. So that variable could be inside the list of factors or not, is not affected by any change you can play in designing the green infrastructure at regional level as you mentioned. The other critics. You adopted the results of ecosystem services mapping estimation according to different models, because for something you use invest, for other things you use other references. But the critics, the critics is ecosystem services depends from the point of view that the benefits of land use. Land use changes, land use structure, the system of territorial values that we estimated through ecosystem services are a benefit from humankind, while ecological networks are really connected to facilitate, to improve the ecological quality of places. It is relevant to use ecosystem services, or it could be enough to achieve the same results to use land use mapping, some metric of landscape, because you mentioned that agricultural activities could influence positive or negatively some situation according to the territorial configuration of those elements.
Okay. Thank you. So that was actually two questions in one. As for the first, there's been a lot of discussion, just a background information for the audience, between me and Francesco about land surface temperature. And I think that Francesco has a point when he says that they are not really 100% reliable. I mean, the land surface temperature retrieved as we did from Landsat imagery. The good news is that nowadays the USGS already provides the land surface temperature maps off the shelf, ready for use, so that's more reliable. But I don't agree when we are looking at land surface temperature as something which is a proxy for global climate, because in my opinion, it is not. Land surface temperature is a very local measurement of a phenomenon, which is, of course, affected also by global phenomenon. But the most important driver of land surface temperature is what kind of land cover you have. It is one thing when you have forest, it's a totally different thing when you have agricultural area. So the most important driver is really local, apart, of course, from what happened worldwide. And as for the second, I truly agree, of course, that ecosystem services are benefit to humans. But actually, we assessed the potential provision of ecosystem service. So not the demand and not the use, but the potential provision, which might or might not be used by people. So it's potential, and it's what ecosystems provide us with. And I think that linkage between ecosystem services and ecological networks, such as corridors, is quite straightforward, especially if you look at the definition provided by the European Commission. So you need to have a lot of potential ecosystem services, and at the same time, you need to have connectivity. Why? Because in the absence of connectivity, what you will have is just patches, which will not result in the provision of ecosystem services because they will not work. They are fragmented like islands. They will be devoid of some important features, such as, for instance, providing nurseries to species. You cannot have real nursery with isolated patches, just stepping stones. So I don't think that using land covers or land uses themselves would be a good idea, because you would lose all the information about the potential offer of ecosystem services. So you will be detaching the potential benefit that they provide a human with.
Let the audience know that we submitted a research project about that. If we want, we will go in deep in this discussion.
So the room is invited to keep your finger crossed for our project. Okay, and I think we got to the end of our slot, and I'm very, very sorry because Georgia couldn't give her presentation.
If we have room in another session,
Georgia, can we see if we can reschedule your presentation? But I think she's not hearing us.
She's not here.
I will write.
I reported the problem and
Yeah, I tried to write her, but without response. So I don't know.
She is not even replying to messages, so I think something is very wrong. We'll try to get in touch with her if she doesn't. So thank you very much. That was the end of this session, and I hope I will see you again, you in other session of the ICSA conference. Thank you for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you very much, Sabrina, Francesco.
please.
Thank you very much
Thank you,
for the
Francesco.
session and the discussion.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
thanks. Thank you.
Sorry, have you seen the presentation or listened me? Or talk it alone?
Hai ancora 30 minuti volendo.
Ma avete sentito la presentazione o ho parlato da sola?
No, non si è sentito niente, infatti ti stavamo anche scrivendo.
Ah, avevo lo schermo condiviso, non si vedeva niente nella chat.
No, non si vedeva niente. Al massimo se ci sono, cioè adesso il presidente della sessione se n'è andato, io posso segnalare che tu hai avuto problemi e magari ti rischedulano per un'altra sessione.
No, vabbè, non c'è problema, non fa niente. Tanto l'importante è che insomma il contributo sia stato visto, ecco, pubblicato, poi la
Ok,
presentazione è
ok.
solo una sintesi.
Comunque segnalerò il problema perché non hai avuto modo di presentare.
Purtroppo non capisco perché non si sentiva niente Ho sentito gli altri interventi e poi
Non lo so, noi
niente più
abbiamo
da
anche
Sabrina.
provato a scrivere in chat, ma forse o non hai visto, non ti sono arrivati i messaggi.
No, avendo io la presentazione cioè, stavo presentando da sola a me stessa, a quanto pare,
Ah, ok,
ho parlato un quarto d'ora
ho
e
capito,
quindi non ho
perché
visto lo
volevamo
schermo.
aiutarti con la condivisione. Mannaggia.
Va bene, niente.
Mi
E quindi hanno
dispiace.
già concluso, diciamo.
Sì, perché ti stavano cercando, ti hanno attesa per altri 10 minuti e poi se ne sono andati.
Ah, ok. No, perché siccome Sabrina mi aveva scritto di andare, che riuscivano a sentirmi e a vedere la presentazione, niente, vabbè, non c'è problema. D'accordo, grazie allora.
No, dispiace, ti ripeto, io posso segnalare il problema lo
No,
segnalo, poi
non ti
se...
preoccupare, non ti preoccupare.
Va
Va
bene,
bene così, anche perché poi domani, dopodomani non ci sono, quindi diventa poi un
ho capito.
problema.
Va bene, allora.
D'accordo,
Mi
grazie
dispiace,
allora.
niente.
A
Ciao,
presto,
a
ciao.
presto, ciao.
Are you going to use the okay. The adapter? No, I need the adapter. I'm for HDMI. It's not really necessary because I could be here and I can present here. So it's not really necessary. Okay, so nice. So I could hear the presentation. Yes. So I'm gonna. No, I have already. I didn't close the tab. Okay. So yes, for so you get it. Yeah. Just in case. Okay, so I'm gonna share this. Okay. So you present, and I will pass to the next slide. Okay. Yes. Which one? Yes. 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 So. if you begin, even start. I will start. Because it's 14, 50. But there's no chair. Oh, so I have the room without, there's no chair. So I have to. Sanjay. Pardon? Sanjay is the. Sanjay is maybe the chair, yeah. It's here or? Continue. You just here. Guys. None of these are the chair, no? No. The planning doesn't offer a proportion. You want I can present you? I don't know. You want the chair? Huh? Who's the chair here? Because it's Sanjay. Doesn't appear in the plan. Oh, cancelled. Then ask Damiano. See. Because I have this. They also, if you go to the program, on the program, the ICCSA.org and program, you see that. Damiano said that I am the chair, so I have to introduce you. Okay, you are the chair. Okay. Okay. Okay, so let's start.
Hello,
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming also to the session at the afternoon. Right now, Professor Marco Simonetti is going to present his paper, an example of use of variational method in quantum machine learning. Professor? Thank you.
Good evening to everyone. And with this paper, we want to introduce deep learning system based on quantum neural network for the binary classification of point of a specific geometric pattern. And it's a very common pattern. It's called the double known pattern. And it's a very real common one. And this that's why we believe that the use of a hybrid deep learning system, and when we say hybrid, we mean classical plus quantum. We think that it can bring some kind of benefits, and not only in terms of
computational acceleration, because you know the technology we have today on quantum computing is not still mature. So we have to wait at least another decade or maybe 2 decades to have a very powerful quantum computing. The chosen data set is only a 2 digital binary classification generator. Very simple. We use a Python generator to generate this data set. And it consists of 2 interspersed semicircle. And at the beginning, they are not overlapped. But after that, we can see that if we want to increase the overlap, we have very good result from our model. And what we used variational methods, and this kind of methods are widely used in physics, and most of all in quantum mechanics. And we use their direct successors, and they are variational quantum algorithms, VQA, and maybe they seem to be the most effective techniques for gaining a real quantum advantage on this device, on actual device with this kind of technology we have. And we can say that this is a kind of optimization, and this is the only optimization we can use now. And okay, this is our scheme, and the aim is to find the exact or a well-approximate solution. The solution is the value parameters we have in our model, and the goal is to minimize the loss function. The function we used in our model is the expected value of the quantum state in output. After that, we have a part that is nonlinear, and it is the part of measure and control of our model. We can see that the quantum circuit is composed by initial part, and in our case is a very simple initial state, because it's only a tensor product 2 and qubit of the state 0. So very simple input state. After that, we have the unitary matrix that perform the transformation of the initial state to another state. And the state depends on x, is the state, and theta is the vector of parameters in our model. In fact, we can see in this picture that the quantum circuit is well described by these 3 equations. The first equation say that we have initial state, quantum state, the transformation, the unitary transformation that depends on theta, the vector theta. Theta, remember, are the parameters of the function. And we obtain a psi state, a final state. After that, we have we need an observable. An observable is a particular transformation. And here we use the Z Pauli matrix to obtain the observable from the when we measure the object from the z-axis point of view. So every exit we have the IDH exit depends on the matrix of value. After that, we calculate the expectation value, the observable, on the IP output, the state, or well, the adjoint state, and the state that depends on it. This is our general structure. It's a very common structure, but normally the quantum state at the initial part is varied or modulated. We choose to leave the state, the initial state, unchanged, but we want to enter and we want to modulate the parameter using a fully connected, so a dense layer that has two entries to input value, and there are the point of the on the plane when we saw before the data set. After that, we have m exit, and m is the number of our parameter. So all I want is to drive all this circuit to obtain the state that I want, and after that I put it in a dense layer, the final dense layer, and after that this result turn in the system to train the system. So the part of training system is this one and this one. Sorry. The structure is like that. We have several sublayer, and every single sublayer is formed by a chain of rotation transformation as rotation around x-axis or y-axis of the block sphere. And this stack is the stack of the rotation around the zeta axis of the block sphere. After that, I have a chain of C naught to perform the entanglement of the state. Well, when I build a network like that, all I want is to maximize expressibility of the circuit and the entangling capability. The expressibility is the capability of my system to explore the entire Hilbert space of the ansatz of the space of the hypothesis of my ansatz. So if I perform only a rotation around the z-axis, all I have is only these points. But if I put an RZ, a rotation around z-axis, and after that, a rotation around x or even y-axis, I can cover all the entire sphere. But it's not sufficient to have the result I hope, because my circuit need the entangling capability, the capability to entangle all the qubits. So this is an example of circuit without an entangling capability, because qubits are independent. Here we have an example of qubits that are entangled with a C0 gate. Okay. After that, we use this data set, as I said before, but we have varied the noise ratio, where the noise ratio is the ratio of our system to overlap data. Noise is very low here, 0.05, noise 0.1, noise 0.25, and as you can see, two categories are overlapped, and here we are a complete overlap of the two categories. As usual in machine learning, we have divided, or we have split into three parts the data set. The 20% of the sample for the training set, the 70% for the training set, 20% for the validation set, and only 10% for the test set of our model. And this is a graph that represents it. What have we used? We used the twin, we have produced two twin models, and we used for one model the quantum simulation platform server by Google, and the other attempt was made with Penelane by Tsunami. And Penelane is perfectly compatible with Keras, TensorFlow, and PyTorch. So very useful to do machine learning. This is our first model, and this is the TensorFlow 1.2. As you can see, we have several layers, input layers, where we have an input with my features. So I have an input with no one dimension, because it depends on the number of samples I put in input. So, our input has two columns, because we have two features, because the two features are the coordinate x and y on our plane on our data set. And we have the same exit. So it's only a simple interface. After that, we put this into a normal feed-forward neural network. 2 and exit is 16. But in parallel, I need to put my parametrical model, and is a model that is an abstract model, because my vector theta have not yet value. So after that are the input for this layer. That is a control PQC. This is a block in TensorFlow Quantum. It receives with input data and model, and it can calculate the expectation value of my model. So my exit is an output layer with dimension 2 in input and dimension 2 in exit. Here we use the simple softmax layer to have probability. This is the three.
Sorry, I don't know.
This is the other model, very similar, but here we don't have the necessity to have two input for this layer because parameters are inside this block. Well, so the number of answers parameters is given by the product of the number of bits, the number of rotation operators acting on each line of the circuit within each sublayer, and the number of sublayers. So I have to multiply all this number to have the dimension of the parameter vectors. The number of trainable parameters, 54 for our models, but 354 by an analog feed-forward neural network. So we gain within the number of trainable parameters. This is the first advantage of our model. And the entire model was compiled using a classical optimizer, stochastic gradient descent. And we used as a loss function the mean absolute error and accuracy for the metric. Here the result of our simulation. As you can see, we have the loss and the accuracy for the training set. And this is the validation loss and the validation accuracy, so for the validation set. As you can see, the result seems to be very good. And it seems they don't suffer on overfitting or area overfitting. This is the table for the text set. Here we have 20 sample on 200 for our test. Here are, and it depends on the number of qubits, and this is the noise, the overlap. And we increase the sample, 100 on 1,000 samples, 500 on 5,000. As you can see, if I have a low noise, we have no problem. Because our network can recognize the two classes, and it can divide it correctly, the two classes, always here, always here, here, and so on. And the model, so we can say that achieve 100% accuracy for low noise tests. And more than 80%, I guess it's a very good value, accuracy for high noise datasets. The same graph for the Penny Lane quantum machine learning test set. Very similar, as you can see. And here a simulation using a simple feed-forward neural network, fully connected, with 1000 sample, noise 0.1 on number of input 2, and parameters, as I said before, 354. As you can see, we have a good graph here for the loss and the validation loss. But as we can see, for the validation accuracy, we have an early overfitting of the model. Because here we didn't use any kind of dropout layers or regularization. So if I take the model in its primitive form, we have an early overfitting phenomenon. Conclusions? Like an analogous FFNN, a quantum network reduces the overfitting, as we saw before, and needs a minor number of trainable parameters to reach the goal. In our future work, we intend to continue our investigation into quantum neural network with data sets, different sunsets, and optimize our data structure. Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting one. Did you compare, because you deal with this two moves problem that the did you compare conventional solution? For example, TP scan, I think, put it this solution. Scan, basically that's a cluster. Scan. Particularly in the case of low error,
just a moment. To see. Ancora.
Sorry. Yeah, here of course we have different degree of noise, right, which enhance the difficulty for clustering, right? So it's interesting, of course, your own machine learning approach. It's very interesting. But I wonder how this approach, in terms of both performance and cost, against the traditional one. I mean, particularly for the first two pattern, I think the TP-scan will be perfect. I would suspect. What do you think?
The model we used is a very simple model. So I guess that we have to complicate or to elaborate a more sophisticated quantum model to obtain the result on more complicated data set or more complex data sets.
Yeah, also your target things, but ambitious beyond conventional approach. Yes.
So we need more tests. Actually, sorry. Now I'm working on a photonic quantum computing, and I saw that the first difficulty I have is to entangle photons, because photons, they don't interact to each other. But qubit here with the spin, they do. So here, all we can say is to add sublayers on our model. This is, I guess, the only possibility to obtain exactly what I want.
If you don't mind, for another question, when you use said that you use 10% of testing, 70% of training and My question is that your training is particular for the patent, input patent, not for other patents. My question is that, of course, this is based on the training data set. So you only this machine learning outcome will only apply for this patent, not for other patents. So how universal or how applicable your approach for other different patents, rather than the input patent itself.
It's a very tricky question. Okay.
We have to cut to give pass to the next speaker because, sorry. Well, thank you very much, Marco, Professor Marco Simonetti, for your presentation. And now, who Darily Darson is the next who comes to present.
Yes, hello, good afternoon.
Works about time series-based frequency analysis of violence and criminalizations.
Could you please remove the PowerPoint from the screen sharing so that I can share my PowerPoint, if possible?
No? So, well, the next, because the next is Backlab Scala. Thank you very much. He's going to present his paper about hermetic parametric B-cubic path defined by the tensor product. So you have to just look to the power. Which one?
Yeah. I hope so.
We'll open my phone.
Yeah. Do you have a PDF viewer?
Yes.
It's better because it will be full screen.
Okay.
Okay.
I can do this if you want. In this way.
Oh, yeah. It's a different aspect ratio.
Yeah, it's okay. If you want, I can change the slides. You give that signal, and we'll off. You prefer changing.
How long is the cable? Okay.
Engineering. That is the reason you're a professor.
So I think a little bit overwhelmed. Okay. Do we need to start the Zoom?
I have already done.
It's running. Okay.
Yes. I'm gonna check to.
Just to be sure.
I'm gonna. I have here the YouTube session. Sometimes fails. I don't know why. But
just to be sure.
Yes. Yes.
That is good.
Yeah. Yes, that's it. Yeah.
So, good afternoon to everybody. Many thanks for coming here. This talk is not actually presenting some, say, new principles. I will try to show you how the hermetic parametric B-cubic patch can be defined easier using the tensor product. It was motivated by teaching duties, because when I am deriving the hermetic B-cubic patch, I usually spend about 2 hours with some nasty mathematics. And if the tensor product is used, it's becoming much more simple. So maybe it might be a motivation also for some other development in that field. Okay, this one.
Try it again. No, yeah, is there?
This one.
No. Left, right.
Okay, right. Okay. So I'm coming from the Kyrgyzstan city. Kyrgyzstan city is a very known city because of beer. The bottom fermentation was invented in Pilsen, so that's why the all beers are called Pilseners. That's our faculty. It's not very visible because of the lighting, and in the city is the second biggest synagogue in the Europe. That is another view to a river that is actually passing the Budweiser, and because Pilsen is a city of beer, so you can even dog drink beer. It is not my dog; it was just taken at the street. I hope that at the end we will not finish as this person from the secret of the Carpathian castle. So the parametric batches used in CAD/CAM systems are used very often, but sometimes they are presented at courses. Here is the some matrix, and if you use it, you get the computational flow, and you can get the result. You have to remember the matrices. That's a totally wrong approach, because I think that people have to understand what's going on and how it was actually developed, what is the behavior, what the properties are, and deriving all those equations is not quite simple. Okay, so there were so many publications about that already available on the libraries and so on. I put here some references because the paper is not available in full scope. So what is the tensor product? Tensor product is actually not very often used and taught at the universities. I don't know why. There is a similar topics of geometrical algebra that is more general than the Gibbs algebra that is used nowadays, known as a matrix algebra. So the tensor product of two vectors is a matrix with those components, and it can be extended to the use for the matrices. So tensor product of matrices is presented. Let us consider something more general, and that is the tensor product on vectors, and vectors are actually the operators, derivative operators. Because derivation is a linear operation, integral is also the linear operation. So there are some properties that we can use. If we use the tensor product on the vector of 1 and derive the derivation about u and derivation about v, you get something like that, and you get this nice matrix where the derivation of the first degree are here, and here is the derivative of the second order. Mixed one. So what is the Hermite curve? Hermite curve is very simple. You have two endpoints and two tangential vectors. The vectors are shortened for the presentation. And we can describe it by the polynomial of the third degree, which is given here. The derivatives are quite easy, easy to determine because it's probably linear, and at the end we get something like this. It means that actually the Hermite form is for the curve is the dot product actually. So with the bicubic patch, it's getting a little bit more complex. As you can see, it's very nasty formulas, and we have to go through all that in detail to find out what is actually the matrix as about. So that's the actually the quadratic form. So that's actually the result. So we are going to make the tensor product of these curves and these curves. That means xu and xv, because all the curves with the constant v or constant u are the Hermite forms. So you can see tangential vectors and also something that is a twist vector that is going orthogonally out of the patch. So usually we are passing all those nasty questions with many indexes and so on. It's very difficult for students to follow it. The result is that we get the endpoint, the tangential vector according to v, according to u, and twist vectors. That we can rewrite the Hermite form in this standard form, that means u cubic u squared u and 1, v cubic v squared v and 1, some matrix defining the matrix, the Hermite form, and this matrix is here. Okay, so we are now going to make the same with the curves and the curves CU and CV with the tangent with the tensor product. And at the end, we can formalize it to this form. So what we do is that we have here the matrix and the vector, that is the one tensor product of matrix with the derivatives and the points, and we get
scheduled for 5:30, 40.
As you can see, it is,
Yes, actually giving this talk.
exactly what we
The next
had
one.
for.
I don't know which talk is now. Okay, then this is.
And P is now x, y, z, or x1, x2, x3, x4, and so on, because it can be extended to more. So we can see that the formula can be rewritten nicely, easily to defining the points, corners of the patch, the tensor product matrix of the operators, and that is actually the standard form. That's the simple derivation of the Hermite form, and because the Hermite form can be easily transformed to Bezier or Prabhu and other forms by using some matrices that are put here, and they are constant, so if you go to another reference, it's defined that it is not over. So I hope that this is actually what actually was for me for a long time a problem to understand, because in all books you can read that the B-cubic patches are tensor surfaces, and nowhere is actually derived how it is done. Okay, so now we have nice and simple formulation. Of course, during the lecture, you have to go a little bit more deeper, because there are only 10 minutes. So I do hope that this approach can be useful for other things, because if I go back,
and then it's your turn again. Because that's
you have 4 points actually,
has to,
and
there's any
in some cases you can use a different formulation and you get different patch. Okay, so acknowledges. I would like to thank my colleagues at the Shandong University in Jinan, also some colleagues from Shandong University, and to my colleagues from the University of Bohemia. So we have time for questions. So questions, please, and there are some references. If you would be interested, it will be in the paper. there is nothing new, there is just new reformulation that is, for me, it's more simple.
Thank you, Professor, for your presentation. We have to expulsar. Yes. Frank? Yes. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. 100%? 200%. Okay, excellent. So, okay. Okay, we have Hahu Dorsan doing the presentation online. When you are ready, could you share your screen so we can see your presentation, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. Can the previous presenter stop sharing, please, so that I can share?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, can you all see and hear?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Good afternoon, esteemed participants. This is Ahude Dursun from Istanbul, Turkey. Today, I am going to give you a brief account of my article entitled Time Series-Based Frequency Analysis of Violence and Criminalization Related Dynamic Mental Health Media News. In this slide, you can kindly see my outline. And let me start with the motivational aspect of the article, actually. The media is a key source of information about mental illness for the public. And research shows media coverage can influence our public attitudes and perceptions about mentally ill people. And when it comes to complex mental illnesses, such as psychosis or schizophrenia, media coverage tends to emphasize negative aspects, often choosing to focus on portrayals of violence, unpredictability, and danger to others. And because mental health patients are continuously linked with these kinds of crime and violence acts, we are influenced to believe that essentially they are dangerous criminals who threaten our safety. However, just as the crimes of one person cannot condemn the rest of us, or we cannot attribute to one group of people, individuals with mental illness are no different to anyone else. They are not all criminals, actually. And in fact, in sharp contrast with media stories, crimes by people with mental illness are actually rare occurrences. And this kind of skewed impression could generate a kind of, increasing stigmatizing attitudes or some myths which are not true. And this cultivates fear among the public. These make up the motivational aspects of my study. So violence displays a dynamic and multivariate nature with different biological, psychodynamic, social, and individual factors. And as I said before, reflection and media text related to mental health and mental illness embodies numerous variables which are not simple to address or assess. And media can play a significant role in criminalization of the mentally ill. And they are actually, the means of media are actually instrumental in shaping and changing attitudes towards mental illness. With this point in mind, the aim of the study was to assess the trends in national discourse through media texts by looking into the volume and content of a sample of 496 news stories about mental illness between the time period 2014 and 2019. So, as for the materials and methods, the mental health media news data set includes the newspaper items related to mental health in the top 3 highest circulating daily papers in Turkey as of 2022. And out of a total number of a larger data set of 725 news items, 496 items were chosen, and they were handled with a focus on violence and criminalization as the related features. And in table 1, you can see the number of news stories covered in these 3 newspapers mentioned. As for the methods, time series analysis was employed to analyze a sequence of data points collected over an interval of time. And another advantage of this analysis is that it shows how variables change over time. It also provides us with an additional source of information and a set order of dependencies between the data. As for the frequency distribution, we see that it is used to organize large amounts of data, which is one benefit. It also shows the number of times a particular observation occurs, and it also shows the value ranges of variables in questions. So we can see that frequencies are often represented in histograms graphically with values of events plotted to produce a frequency distribution. And here, N refers to the total number of observations, I mean the sample. K refers to the total number of boxes. And M histogram fulfills the following conditions for the calculations according to equation 1, which you can see on this current slide. Table 2 and Table 3 respectively show the time series-based frequency distribution of violence content and criminalization content in the news items according to the number of violence content and according to the year of violence content. The same applies for the criminalization as well. And on this next slide, we see the histograms for the time series-based frequency analysis of both violence content and criminalization content. We see that the year 2016 was the time when we saw the highest number of news stories which affiliated mental health problems and people with mental health with criminalization and violence. So after this brief account, I may move on to the conclusions, actually. Mental illnesses associated with violence and criminalization in media coverage is a problematic issue. And media coverage has effects on our public beliefs and attitudes toward public health. So the study which I have presented actually has tried to put a different perspective in a different setting. I tried to examine the content of recent news coverage related to mental illnesses and assessing the trends of violence and criminalization over time in Turkish context through a computational application approach with the methodologies I have just explained about time series analysis and frequency-based analysis. So the frequency analysis has been performed on the media text dataset in accordance with the changes over the years. And these analyses based on time series show that violence, both interpersonal and or self-directed, as well as criminalization, have been found to be the most frequently addressed topic among the other ones mentioned in the dataset. So the results derived from the analysis reveal that the focus of news media on violence is not proportional to the real dates of actual violence among individuals who suffer from mental illnesses. So this research may suggest that such a persistent emphasis on violence and criminalization may intensify social stigmatization, hinder attempts to seek professional help, and cause deterioration of the life quality of individuals afflicted with mental problems, as well as the life quality of their friends, family members, and acquaintances. And the findings of the current study can also shed light on future directions by guiding journalistic practices, training and reporting, as well as promoting public awareness and emphasizing the importance of providing accurate accounts of mental illnesses in media coverage. So with these notes on future directions, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me. If you have any questions, I would be pleased to respond to them.
Okay. Any question? Pardon?
Thank you for your presentation.
Could you come here? The speaker is here, and you are too far. That maybe the speaker. Could you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wonder, you looking at this the media impact on mental
diseases
or mental disorder. How it is related can be used to, for example, the sentiment analysis in social media. How it related? I mean, how I'm curious. The impact is pretty much individual, right? I mean, I'm curious how you gather the data for your research.
The data are collected by certain keywords like mental illness and schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, some of the mental illnesses. And based on this, through electronic database, we gather the data and then sort it out and prepare the Excel sheets, and we have the coding sheets. In this way, we sort out the data. This also applies for social media, but in my case, it was newspapers, written newspapers, print media. However, I access them through electronic environment.
Yeah, so certainly you see the possibility to extend your approach or method to social media context,
yes.
right?
It would be, yes, more popular and more recent, you are right. However, newspapers are still respected in our country and they are regarded as source of information. For this reason, I opted for this, but for the, of course, extended research, that's very true. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's very to the point. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, may I ask a question? My question is that could you explain the application steps followed on the study dataset related to the experimental results? Could you explain it?
Of course. About the time series analysis, first of all, the data were sequenced and then the frequencies were carried out. After that step, the width of the data group was measured through its frequency, and finally histograms were constructed based on the analysis we gained from the tables. These were the subsequent stages followed for the study data set, the media text data set, I mean, which is made up of repetitive numbers in order to construct the histograms.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that the results of the analysis in your study show that the findings will contribute to the proceeding in the domain of public health.
I hope so. This is really an important issue and a critical one. I also do hope so. Thank you very much to everyone.
Okay, thank you for your contribution with your study and your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Karaca. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Okay, seeing that it's time to the next speaker to present. Ahu, thank you very much for your presentation. And personally, accept my apologize for you. I didn't expect that you were all online.
No worries, please. No worries. Thank you very much for all your efforts, indeed.
Professor Elias, thank you for advising me that she was online. I didn't take credit for the duty. And now it's turn of Professor Oliver. Well, sorry,
Andreas.
Andreas Schultz. Sorry for that he's going to present his paper about comparative compression robustness evaluation of digital imaging, for instance. No, yeah, we have here your. Okay, nice. Slide. Okay, nice name. I'm gonna check that is presenting. Okay, we have to share my screen. This one.
Stay close to the microphone.
Yes, you have your mic, so if you can talk louder or
It's difficult.
Yeah, no.
I will try.
Okay, so I'm gonna turn off the volume. This.
We didn't tell him we also have the camera, no?
Okay. You can start, please.
Okay.
You want to? Yes, of course. You have the full control.
Full control, that's fine. Yeah, so welcome to this last presentation of today, as I've seen. So it's about the robustness of digital image forensic techniques. So looking into the question, which of ISO still image coding standards and another one are well suited for robustness or are well suited to attack digital image forensics. So what is digital image forensics if you're not familiar with that? So due to Photoshop, deepfakes or so, image information, visual information is no longer reliable. So that's clear. So we need tools for checking the integrity or the authenticity of data. And we will be looking at that. One of the most important classes of attacks are these object removal, object forgery, and copy move forgery attacks. So these are very predominant, and then there are many tools how to cope with them. And also a second methodology from the digital image forensics field is camera device identification based on the photo response function format. So, and in this work, we have looked into these two methodologies. So the SIF-based copy move detection on the one side, and on the other side, PMU-based camera identification with respect to their robustness against lossy image compression. So what's the relation between those two fields? So why do we look into that in particular? So the digital image forensic techniques typically look into subtle changes in images. So most often this is not visible, hardly visible, so it's very subtle changes that need to be detected. And as a consequence, lossy compression is able to remove these changes. So if an attacker has changed something in the image, and afterwards the lossy compression has been turned on, so to say, then the traces of the changes might have been gone. So they are natural enemies, kind of, and that's why it's interesting to look into that. And in particular, what was the reason for that? We often see high frequency phenomena as the traces, and of course, compression removes high frequency, so that's why they intervene. If we look into the literature on digital image forensics so far, we mostly have seen work on JPEG. So this is the dominant field, and the other codecs that we've looked into have not really been investigated so far. So in that sense, this is original work, that there is no work out there looking at those other codecs and comparing them. Yeah, so we want to answer basically two questions. So one question for the attacker and one question for the defender, so to say. So we would like to know which is favorable in terms of compression in order to have the least impact on the digital forensic image techniques, or we would like to learn which technique is best suited to conceal the traces in order to raise an alarm if we see an image has been compressed with this method. Then we can say, oh, there is danger, maybe they have just done this in order to conceal the traces. So, what is SIF-based copy move detection? It's a pretty obvious thing, basically. So if we have a copy move forgery, what we do basically is we compute SIF key points, and then we look at the closest key point, and then we cluster basically the results. And if we have clusters, we have more than one or more than two, this is just a threshold, key points to match, then we say, okay, this is a copy move forgery. And here on the left-hand side, we see here is a true positive. So there is really a copy of this woman walking. So this is a true positive. But on the other hand, we can have also false positives. Because, for example, in buildings, we have repetitive structures like those columns. They are, of course, very similar. And often we get them false positive matches from such repetitive structures. So that's also the problem in using this technique, it's difficult to avoid this in principle because they are so simple. Okay, the second technique is PRU-based camera identification. Well, it's beside deep learning, one of the most prominent and the most investigated techniques out there. So basically, we have two stages here. We have the first generation of the photo response non-uniformity that uses basically reference images, applies a denoising filter, then subtract this. So we get lots of noise residuals here, and then we average those. This is the PRU pattern that is used basically as the fingerprint of the camera. And if we want to check if an image has been taken with this camera, we take the image, we apply the denoising filter, subtract the two, get the noise residual, and then basically correlate this noise residual with the PRU pattern. So that's what is being done. Okay, and if we compare this, so just to look at this, so here we look basically at the fragile noisy signal. So this is a fragile signal somehow. And on the other hand, if we look back what this technique does, it computes very robust features. So SIFT key points have been designed to be robust. So although both are forensic techniques, they differ significantly in terms of their properties and behavior. Yeah, so briefly, which codecs do we look into? So JPEG, of course, JPEG 2000, JPEG XR, and then also we use VPG, which is basically the interframe coding technique of HEVC, so H.265. So those four are used. We use two forensic data sets. So one is a copy-move forgery data set, of course. Yeah, we need one of those. And the second one for camera identification is the Dresden image database. And here you see some compression examples, although this is in the projection difficult to see, especially from your distance. So, but what you might recognize, the JPEG loses all the colors already. So at this compression rate, which is, I think it's around 60, we already lose all the color. So, and in the other two, so JXR and then JPEG 2000, we still have the colors. Here we see a bit more, blur here, but still it's comprehensible. So the result on the first one. So this is now about the copy move detection. Here we look at the accuracy in general of the copy move detection. We have three colors here. The blue one is JPEG XR, the orange one is JPEG 2000, and the gray one is JPEG. And what is interesting is that at the low compression ratio, so here is compression ratio on this axis, it's also increasing here, but with low compression ratios, with high quality, we see that the JPEG is best. Although we know for 20 years that JPEG is not the best, but still for this application where it's about robustness, and then there are other reasons also, but here JPEG is good. Only if we increase the compression ratio significantly, from a certain point on, here JPEG 2000 and JPEG XR get better. But interestingly, not a lot. So in other applications, we see really a huge gap period. Here, the gap is not so huge. And in particular, in this area where we go down here, where the accuracy is already going down a bit, it's not so interesting. So this is, of course, the more interesting area. Here, JPEG is interestingly on the lead. This might have to do also with the artifacts that are created. So JPEG creates artifacts, and those can be exploited by the SIFT key points. So basically, the compression generates additional data that can be useful to detect the copy move attacks. So I think this is the reason why JPEG still does so good, because it creates artifacts on its own that are useful for this application. What is somehow interesting is to look at the distribution between false positives and false negatives if we increase the compression ratio. And we see here that the false positives, they really go down. And in the paper, there is a second example with the different setting where they almost go down to 0. And then all the problematic matches are caused by false negatives. So this is also interesting to see that the share really changes depending on which compression ratio you actually use. And this has to be, of course, looked into, because if we do it in uncompressed manner, the false positives here dominate extremely. But this changes if we increase that, and that's a problem. But it depends on how you view it. But it's a property that has to be looked into. So that's the second application, and here it's more like we expect. So what we see here on the y-axis is the equal error rate of the camera identification process, while here again we have the compression ratio. Here again compression ratio, and this is the fault rejection rate here on the y-axis. What is interesting to observe is first we have talked about compression ratios 50, 60, 70. Here we talk about 5, 10, 20. So here the degradation starts much earlier. And the reason is, of course, that the PRU signal, as I said, it's really a lightweight signal. So you can easily distort it, and so this compression impacts the extraction of the PRU signal considerably. And what we see here is the typical behavior, as we would expect somehow. So here JPEG gets bad very soon. So we will get equal error rate of 20% here already. So this is at the compression ratio 20. Then JPEG 2000 is second year, and PPG and JPEG XR are the best here. Following actually the timeline in the development of the standards. If we look at the false rejection rate, it's a similar picture here, but here we have still the discrimination of PPG, which is here the best one, and then JPEG XR, JPEG 1000, JPEG. So as one would expect it. But here we see clearly different results when we compare these different forensic applications. Okay, so to conclude, in principle, it's clear. We see that the accuracy of forensic tasks is reduced. So yes, that's clear. But for the first application, so for the SIF-based copy move forgery detection, JPEG is superior to the other standard, at least in the application settings which are realistic, because we have good image quality. So here it's better. And in the other areas, it's worse, but this is not so relevant because the image quality is good. For PRU-based camera sensor identification, JPEG XR and PPG are clearly the best options, but here we see the degradation starting much earlier. And this is due to the properties of the application. Okay, so yeah, so SIF-based is rather robust, and PRU and noise residual are severely impacted. What we have not done so far is to look at JPEG XL, that's the even more recent standard, and also to look into deep learning-based lossy compression schemes, how they work with the forensic. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Let's check if no.
Actually, I will have perhaps a question. The JPEG, I am not working with it. JPEG is actually using 8x8 matrix for coding.
Yes, 8x8 blocks and applies DCT then.
And the question is, if I imagine some manipulation with the images, so the blocks will not be the same.
No.
So it is easier to detect due to the blocking approach.
I mean, you say the blocks are not the same.
They will be like this. They will be like this.
But yeah, okay. So you mean we shift the block eventually and drop the image differently? Yeah, but only if you do that. If you keep the original resolution and do not drop, then this does not happen. So there is no guarantee for this to happen. Of course, if that happens, we can see, okay, there is now a misalignment between the block network and the image, but yeah, it depends on how you cut it. And if you cut it at all. So if you do not cut and do not crop, you just copy and remove something, then you will not see this. And especially if you, but this is something, of course, this is something you can do. Yeah? If you detect in your data that has been copied into the image a different block pattern, of course, then okay, that's the proof that this has been manipulated. So that's an approach that has been used. But that's another approach. Just so we just look into one of the most popular approaches here, but it's not the only one.
Any more questions?
I'm not the expert in this field, just curious. The compression in JPEG is based on the block, the equation. If someone with some cut or problem or area appears visually by naked eye, difficult to detect. In terms of whether it's authentic or it's true or fake. But the computation is capable. One piece of difference, the computer should be able to detect, right?
Yeah.
So that's.
But it depends what you have to compare to. Usually those forensic techniques, they are blind. You do not have an original.
You need a low-run truth.
So you only have the image, and you have to decide based on the image if something happened or not. If you have the original one, it's trivial.
Okay, that's the challenge, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah. But in terms of time performance, they are equally good, the methods, okay?
You mean the compression ratios? The compression techniques? No, JPEG 2000 is by far the most. No, so VPG is even worse in terms of performance because the code is not optimized. So that's a bit unfair. But JPEG 2000 has. So if you just look at the complexity, about 10 times the complexity of JPEG, and JPEG XR is kind of in between those two.
Do we have any next speaker?
No. Also, we have time.
So we can do until midnight.
If you want to skip the party.
Very famous is Joe Biden's curve, suddenly. That so November started this after stop the counting vote, and they used to do.
Okay, yeah.
Like this one, and this one they do like this.
Yeah, when counting the votes.
Yeah, so some very arbitrary, peculiar. Certainly, it's abnormal. I mean, actually, in the literature, it is called "Bill for the Law." The Bill for the Law, she also has been adopted by Department of Justice.
Yeah, Benford's law is it's applied in forensics.
The judge can take the judgment about this one. So I wonder if what is idea to the image.
Yes, it's been done. So that there is a lot of work on applying this Benford's law to image forensics.
Okay.
Yeah, there is work on that. So, for example, the group of Jana Dittmann at Magdeburg University, they have done several publications on that. So, if you're interested, you can just look at it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So then, I mean, this is very sort of the law stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So can you even implement in the process?
Yeah, that's the aim also. I mean, you need to be able to do this in order to be able to work at court, to prove or disprove something. Yeah. Okay. You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay.
Andreas, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for the people to come. We
we finished the session of today, and now it's turned to the welcome drink at 6:30, and sorry, enjoy it.
You live there. You were fed up with the scenery, right? Yes, of course.
Yes, just a question. I got the card for the public transport.
Yeah. Pardon, Andre. This is your. Yeah. Sorry. You got or you didn't got?
I got it.
Yeah. Okay.
My question is how it can be used.
Oh.
On the bus and underground.
Yes.
And how does it work?
Okay.
There is a slot or
the bus.
Yeah.
When you enter to the bus, next to the driver,
so
there's
I have
like
to
a
go to
machine.
the driver.
Just
click it.
Yeah, exactly. And the subway.
Yeah.
Or the ground. Yeah. It depends of the station, the open station, because there are some like
it's okay. It's a click
yeah,
again.
yeah.
Okay.
And also it's the card works in a way that it has money. So the price of each ticket has its own price. And if you want to recharge the wallet, the card, you can go to the metro, the subway station here, and there you can recharge the.
Okay, and what is the deposit there now?
You got €5 in.
€5.
Yes.
Okay.
The subway usually costs 18 cents.
So it's enough for getting down the city and back for 4 times.
Yes, more or less. Yes.
The rest I will pay at the driver. Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
So the drink is here.
Yes, at the botanic where we did the lunch. There.
Oh, okay. I heard from your colleague. She said that she will move lunch to this.
Oh, I'm gonna check that. No, it's still.
But I wonder if we have to go back for the drink.
It's in the botanical garden. I have here the programming.
Okay. Also, the same place.
Yes, the same place. And don't worry. We have initially used, so I'm here with the professor, and yeah, but
Well done, Amin.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's good I don't have to talk.
How are you? Are you better?
I'm still with a horrible throat, but let's see. How does tomorrow? You did a great job today.
The professor can you come here? Come here. Because I want to say hello. I don't know. I want to turn on the he's seeing you the camera. If you want to.
You can switch on the camera.
He's still. I don't know.
Yeah, we have camera.
Because I'm sharing the screen, so this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did this.
Nice.
How are you?
You're having a good time now.
I have a good time. I have very good time, but I finished my mission and I enjoy your presentation.
You have a lot of interaction with the presenters. I always like that, and you have some discussion at least. Make people think. That's very good.
Are you getting better?
Yeah.
Take a water. Take more
Look
water.
who's here.
Yes, that's essential. Yeah. See you
Soledad.
afterwards. Yeah.
Bye,
Wish
how
you
are you?
Bye.
Quick
Guys,
recover.
I start crying again.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. See you around.
Okay, I see you around tomorrow. You have a good time, no? You have to drink for me, so I need to drink a lot, they say.
You're prepared. You need some tea, huh?
Tea, you see? I learned from you.
Okay, so Damian is here. Damian,
Yeah, a little
we
close,
have
no?
Don here. So when you can, just close the
Okay.
session.
See you tomorrow, guys. Have a good time.
I hope
See
see
you.
you in presential instead of